Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai. We'll go on with chapter 48 of book 9 of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. Nayana said, O Narada, I will now speak of the dhyam and the method of worship of Sri Devi Manasa, as stated in the Samaveda. Here, I meditate on the Devi Manasa, whose color is fair like that of the white kampaka flower, whose body is decked all over with real jewel ornaments, whose clothing is purified by fire, whose sacred thread is the nagas, the serpents, who is full of wisdom, who is the foremost of great yanams. She is the presiding deity, the Siddhas, who herself is a Siddha, and who bestows cities to all. O Muni, thus meditating on her, one should present her with flowers, scents, ornaments, offerings, and foods, and various other articles, pronouncing the principal seed mantra, O Narada, the 12-lettered Siddhi mantra to be mentioned below, yields to the bhaktas their desires like the kalpa tree. This mantra is Om Hrim Shrim Klim Aim Manasa Devyaye Swaha. Repetition of this 5 lakhs of times yields success to those who repeat it. He who attains success in this mantra gets unbounded fame in the world. Poisons become nectar to him, and he himself becomes famous like Dhanvantari. If anybody bathes in one Sankranti, the day when the sun enters into a new sign, and going to a private room invokes the Devi mantra, Manasa Isana, and worships her with devotion before the Devi on the 5th day of the fortnight, he becomes certainly wealthy, endowed with sons and name and fame. Thus I have described to you the method of worship of the Manasa Devi. Now here's an anecdote that I heard from Dharmadeva. In olden days, men became greatly terrified on the earth from snakes and took refuge of Kasyapa, the supreme amongst the Munis. The Maharishi Kasyapa also became very afraid. He then, with Brahma, and by his command, composed a mantra following the principal modes of the Vedas. While composing this mantra, he intensely thought of the Devi, the presiding deity of the mantra. Through the power of his tapasya and through the mental power, the Devi Manasa appeared and was named so as she was produced from the sheer influence of mind. On being born, the girl went to the abode of Shiva in Kailash and began to worship him and chant hymns to him with devotion. For 100,000 divine years, the daughter of Kasyapa served Mahadeva. When he became pleased, he gave her the great knowledge and made her recite the Samaveda and bestowed on her the 8-lettered Krishna mantra, which is like the kalpa tree. Shri Hrim Klim Krishnaye Nama was the 8-lettered mantra. She got from him the kavacha, the amulet, auspicious to the 3 worlds. The method of worship and all the rules of repeating the name of the deity attended with burnt offerings and oblations, and went by his command to perform in Pushkara very hard austerities. There she worshipped Krishna for 3 yugas. Sri Krishna then appeared before her. On seeing Krishna, immediately the girl, worn out by austerities, worshipped him, and she was also worshipped by Sri Krishna. Krishna granted her the boon, let you be worshipped throughout the world, and disappeared. O Narada, she was thus first worshipped by the Deva Krishna, secondly by Lord Shiva, thirdly by Maharishi Kasyapa and the Devas. Then she was worshipped by the Munis, Manus, Nagas, and men, and she became widely known in the 3 worlds. Kasyapa gave her over to the hands of Jaratkaru Muni. At the request of the Brahmin Kasyapa, the Muni Jaratkaru married her. After the marriage, one day, being tired with his long work of tapasya, Jaratkaru laid his head on the hip and loins of his married wife and fell asleep. Gradually, the evening time came. The sun set. Then Manasa thought, if my husband fails to perform his sandhya, the daily duty of the Brahmins, he would be involved in the sin of Brahmahatya. It is definitely stated in the Sastras that if any Brahmin does not perform his sandhya in the morning and in the evening, he becomes wholly impure, and the sin of Brahmahatya and the other crimes come down on his head. Arguing thus these thoughts in her mind, as commanded by the Vedas, at last she awakened her husband, who then got up from his sleep. The Muni Jarat said, O chaste one, I was sleeping happily. Why have you thus interrupted my sleep? All his vows turned out useless who injures her husband. Her tapas, fastings, gifts, and other meritorious works all come to vain who do unpleasant things to her husband. She worships her husband, she said to have worshipped Sri Krishna. For the sake of fulfilling the vows of the chaste woman, Vishnu himself becomes their husbands. All sorts of charities, gifts, all sacrifices, keeping of the truth, worshipping of the devas, nothing can turn out equal to everyone, even 1/16th part of serving one's husband. She ultimately goes with her husband to the region Vaikuntha. She serves her husband in this holy land, Bharata. She comes certainly of a bad family who does unpleasant words or says unpleasant words to her husband. She goes to hell as long as the sun and moon last, and then she becomes born in a lower class. Jaratkaru, the best of the Munis, became angry, and his lips began to tremble. Seeing this, the best Manasa, shivering with fear, addressed her husband. I have broken your sleep and awakened you, fearing you might miss your time of sandhya, and I have committed an offense. Punish me as you think. I know that a man goes to the hell as long as the sun and moon last in this world, who throws an obstacle where any man eats, sleeps, or enjoys with the opposite sex. O Narada, thus saying, the Devi Manasa fell down at her husband's feet and cried again and again. On the other hand, knowing the Muni angry and ready to curse her, the son came there with Sandhya Devi, and he humbly spoke to him with fear. O Bhagavan, seeing me going to set, and fearing that you may miss Dharma, your chaste wife has awakened you. O Brahman, now I am also under your refuge. Forgive me, O Bhagavan. You should not curse me. The more so, a Brahmana's heart is as tender as the fresh butter. The anger of a Brahmana lasts only half the twinkling of an eye. When a Brahman becomes angry, he can burn all this world and can make a new creation. So who can possess an influence like a Brahman? A Brahman is part of Brahma. He is shining day and night with the tejas of Dharma. A Brahmana meditates always on the eternal light of Brahma. O Narada, hearing the words of the son, the Brahman became satisfied and blessed him. The son also went to his own place, thus blessed duly. To keep his promise, the Brahman Jaratkaru quitted Manasa. She became very sorry and began to cry aloud with pain and anguish. Being very much distressed by the danger, she remembered her Ishtadeva, Mahadev, Lord Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, and her father, Maharishi Kasyapa. On the very instant when Manasa remembered Sri Krishna, the Lord of the Gopis, Mahadeva, Shiva, Brahma, and Maharishi Kasyapa appeared there. Then, seeing his own desired deity, Sri Krishna, superior to Prakriti beyond the attributes, Jaratkaru began to praise him and bowed down to him repeatedly. Then, bowing down to Mahadeva, Brahma, and Kasyapa, he inquired why they had come there. Brahma then instantly bowed down at the lotus feet of Krishna and spoke in befitting words at that time. If the Brahmin Jarat Karu learns at all his legal wife is devoted to her own dharma, he should first of all have a son born of her to fulfill his dharma. O Muni, any man can quit his wife after he has impregnated her and got a son. But if without having a son he leaves his wife, then all his merits are lost, as all water leaks out of the sieve or strainer. O Narada, hearing thus the words of Brahma, the Muni Jarat Karu, by his yoga power, recited a mantra and touching the navel of Manasa, spoke to her. O Manasa, a son will be born in your womb, self-controlled, religious, and best of the Brahmins. That son will be fiery, energetic, renowned, well-qualified, and foremost of the knowers of the Vedas, a great Jnanam, and the best of the yogis. That son is a true son indeed, who uplifts his family, who is religious and devoted to Hari. At his birth, all the Pitris dance with great joy, and the wife is a true wife who is devoted to her husband, good-natured, sweet-speaking, and she is religious. She is the mother of sons, she is the woman of the family, and she is the preserver of the family. He is the true friend indeed, the giver of one's desired fruits, who imparts devotion to Vishnu. That father is a true father who shows the way to devotion to Vishnu, and she is the true mother through whom this entering into the womb ceases forever. That sister is the true kind sister from whom the fear of death vanishes. That guru is the guru who gives the Vishnu mantra and the true devotion to Vishnu. That guru is the real bestower of a knowledge who gives the dhyanams by which Sri Krishna is meditated, in whom that whole universe, moving and non-moving from the Brahma down to a blade of grass, is appearing and disappearing. The devotion and knowledge of Sri Vishnu is the essence of all knowledge, and else is vain and mockery. It is through this real knowledge that every bondage from the world is severed. But the guru who does not impart devotion and knowledge is not a real guru. Rather, he is an enemy that leads one to bondage. O chaste one, you better worship that undecaying Parabrahma, who is beyond the attributes. O beloved, I have left you out of a pretense. Please excuse me for this. The chaste women are always forgiving. Never they become angry because they are born of sattva gunas. Now I go to Pushkara for tapasya. You better go wherever you like. Those who have no desire have their minds always attached to the lotus feet of the Lord. O Narada, hearing the words of Karu, the Devi Manasa, became very much distressed and bewildered with great sorrow. Tears began to flow from her eyes. She then humbly spoke to her dearest husband, O Lord, I have not committed any such offense, as you leave me altogether when I have thus broken your sleep. However, kindly show thyself to me when I will recollect you. The bereavement of one's friends is painful, more than that of the bereavement of a son. Again, one's husband is dearer than her 100 sons, so the bereavement of one's husband is the heaviest of all. As the mind of one-eyed man into his one eye, as the mind of the thirsty is attached to water, as for the mind of the hungry is attached to food, as the mind of the learned is attached to the sastras, as the mind of the trader is attached to trade, so the minds of chaste women are attached to their husband. Thus saying, Manasa fell down at the feet of her husband. Jarat Karu, the ocean of mercy, then took her for a moment on his lap and drenched her body with tears from his eyes. The Devi Manasa, too, distressed at the bereavement of her husband, also drenched the lap of the Muni with tears from her eyes. Some time after, the true knowledge arose in them both, and they both became free from fear. Jarat Karu then enlightened his wife and asked her to meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord and the Supreme Spirit repeatedly. Thus saying, he went away for his tapasya. Manasa, distressed with sorrows, went to her Ishtadeva, Mahadeva, on Kailash. The auspicious Lord Shiva and Parvati both consoled her with knowledge and advice. Some days after, on an auspicious day and an all-auspicious moment, she gave birth to a son born in part of Narayana, and as the guru of the yogis and as the preceptors to the Janamins. When the child was in mother's womb, he heard the highest knowledge from the mouth of Mahadeva. Therefore he was born as Yogendra and the spiritual teacher, the Janams. On his birth, Bhagavan Shiva performed his natal ceremonies and performed various auspicious ceremonies. The Brahmanans chanted the Vedas for the welfare of the child. Various wealth and jewels were distributed by Shiva to the Brahmins, and Parvati gave 1,00,000 cows and various jewels to others. After some days, Mahadeva taught him the 4 Vedas with their 6 limbs and gave him at last the Mrityunjaya mantra. As in Manasa's mind there reigned the devotion to her husband, the devotion to her Ishtadeva and Guru, the child's name was kept Astika. Astika then got the Maha mantra from Shankara, and by the command went to Pushkara to worship Vishnu, the Supreme Spirit. There he practiced tapasya for 3,00,000 divine years, and then he returned to Kailash to bow down to the great yogi and the Lord Shiva. Then bowing down to Shiva, he remained there for some time when Manasa with her son Astika went to the hermitage of Kasyapa, her father. Seeing Manasa with son, the Maharishi's gladness knew no bounds. He fed innumerable Brahmanas for the welfare of the child and distributed lakhs and lakhs of jewels. The joy of Aditi and Diti, the wives of Kasyapa, knew no bounds. Manasa remained there for a long time with her son. O child, hear now anecdote on this. One day, due to bad karma, a Brahmana cursed the king Pariksit, the son of Abhimanyu, one rishi's son, named Shringa, sipping the water of the river, cursed thus. When a week expires, the snake Taksaka will bite you, and you will be burned with the poison of that snake. Hearing this, the king Pariksit, to rescue his life, went to a place solitary where wind even cannot have access, and he lived there. When the week was over, Dhanvantari saw while he was going to the road the snake Taksaka, who was also going to bite the king. A conversation and great friendship arose between them. Taksaka gave him voluntarily a gem, and Dhanvantari, getting it, became pleased and went back gladly to his house. The king Pariksit was lying on his bedstead when Taksaka bit the king. The king died soon and went to the next world. The king Janamejaya then performed the funeral rites of his father and commenced afterwards the Sarpa Yagya, a sacrifice where the snakes are the victims. In that sacrifice, innumerable snakes gave up their lives by the Brahma Teja, the fire of Brahman. At this, Taksaka became terrified and took refuge of Indra. The Brahmins then, in a body, became ready to burn Taksaka along with Indra, when Indra and the other devas went to Manasa, Mahendra, bewildered with fear, and began to chant hymns to her. Manasa called her own son Astika, who then went to the sacrificial assembly of the gods, Janamejaya, and begged that the lives of Indra and Taksaka be spared. The king, at the command of the Brahmanas, granted their lives. The king then completed his sacrifice and gladly gave the dakshina to the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas, Munis, and Devas collected and went to Manasa with devotion and with great love and care, and chanted hymns to her. Then bowing down before her and under the instruction of Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva offered her 16 articles, sacrifices, and various other good and pleasant things. O Narada, thus worshipping her, they all went to their respective places. Thus I have told you the anecdote of Manasa. What more would you like to hear her say? Narada said, O Lord, how did Indra praise her, and what was the method of him worshipping her? I want to hear this. Narayana said, Indra first took his bath, and performing Archmaniam, and becoming pure, he put on a fresh and clean clothing and placed Manasa Devi on a jeweled throne. Then, reciting the Vedic mantras, he made her perform her bath by the water of the Mandakini, the celestial river Ganges, poured from a jeweled jar, and then made her pot of the beautiful clothing inflammable by fire. Then he caused sandalwood paste to be applied to her body all over, and devotion offered for washing her feet, an offering of grass and flowers and rice as a token of preliminary worship. First of all, the 6 Devatas, Ganesh, Sun, Fire, Vishnu, Shiva, and Shiva, were worshipped. Then, when the 10-lettered mantra Om Hrim Shrim Manasa Devi Swaha offered all the offerings to her, stimulated by the god Vishnu, Indra worshipped with great joy the Devi with 16 articles, so very rare to any other person. Drums and instruments were sounded from the celestial heavens, and flowers strewn all over the head of Manasa. Then, at the advice of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the Devas and the Brahmanas, Indra, with the tears in his eyes, began to chant hymns to Manasa, when his whole body was thrilled with joy and hairs stood on their ends. Indra said, O Devi Manasa, thou standest the highest amongst the chaste women. Therefore I want to chant hymns to thee. Thou art higher than the highest, thou art most supreme. What I now praise thee, wanting hymns to characterize by the description of one's nature, it is said in the Vedas, but, O Prakriti, I am unable to describe thy qualities. Thou art of the nature of Sudasattva, higher than the pure Sattvic. Thou art free from anger and malice. The Muni Jarat Karu could not forsake thee. Therefore it was that he prayed for thy separation before, O chaste one. I have now worshipped thee. Thou art an object of worship as Mother Aditi to all. O Mother full of forgiveness, O Sarvaswati, it is through thee that my wife, sons, and my life are saved. I am worshipping thee. Let thy love be increased. O World Mother, thou art eternal. Thou art thy worship is extend everywhere in the universe. Yet I worship thee to have it extended further and further. O Mother, those who worship thee with devotion on the Sankranti day of the month of Asada, or on the Naga Panchami day, or on the Sankranti day of every month, they get their sons and grandsons wealth and fame and grain, and are gratified and learned and renowned. If anybody does not worship thee, of ignorance rather, if he censures thee, he will be bereft of Lakshmi, and he will always be afraid of snakes. Thou art the Griya Lakshmi of all householders, and the Raja Lakshmi of Vaikuntha. Bhagavan Jarat Karu, the great Muni, born in part of Narayana, is thy husband. Father Kasyapa has created thee mentally by his power of tapas and with fire to preserve us. Thou art the mental creation, hence thy name is Manasa. Thou thyself hast become Siddha Yogi that in this world by thy mental power, hence thou art widely known as Manasa Devi in this world and worshipped by all. O Devi, thou always servest truth, hence thou art the nature of truth. He certainly gets thee, who always thinks of thee verily as the nature of truth. O Narada, thus praising the sister Manasa and receiving from her the desired boon, Indra went back to his own abode. The Devi Manasa then honored and worshipped everywhere, and thus worshipped by her brother, long lived in her father's house with her son. One day, Srimad, the heavenly cow, came from the Golaka and bathed Manasa with milk and worshipped her with great devotion and revealed to her all the wisdom to be kept very secret. O Narada, thus worshipped by the Devas and Surabi and the Devi Manasa went to the heavenly abode. O Muni, one gets no fear of snakes who recites this holy stotra composed by Indra and worships Manasa. His family descendants are freed from the fear due to snake. If anyone becomes siddha in this stotra, poison becomes nectar to him. Reciting the stotra 5 lakhs of times makes a man a siddha in this stotra, so much so that he can sleep on a bed of snakes and he can ride on snakes. Here ends the 48th chapter of the 9th book on the anecdote of Manasa in the Mahapuranam Srimad Devi Bhagavatam of 18,000 verses by Maharishi Veda Vyasa. Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshvari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.